Hi, this is Professor Favors with the lecture on complex sentences. So it looks like by rereading the syllabus as well as the information from the course text, it seems like it's um, a bit of a review, even though I would like for you to identify dependent clauses, right? Just as a quick review. So this is reviewing complex sentences, specifically dependent clauses, and then of course reviewing the ICDC and DC, comma IC dynamic, and then compound sentences, of course, comma splices, run-ons, previous methods, and five simple sentence patterns. So this is the lecture on complex sentences, reviewing dependent clauses as reflected in the ICDC, DCIC dynamics. This lecture reviews compound sentences using comma splices, run-ons, previous methods for compound sentences, including method one, fanboys, method two, semicolon by itself, and method three, semicolon plus conjunctive adverb plus comma. And you can find all of this information in the course text. Okay, so of course, reviewing five simple sentence patterns, you can find this on pages 29 to 36, 41 to 45. And then we understand that the simple sentence is defined as a sentence that houses a subject and a verb and will be considered an independent clause. And so when you are identifying the dependent clause, usually the dependent clause either precedes, the independent clause either precedes the dependent clause or comes after it or succeeds it. So Tom threw the ball, John ran. Of course, we have two subjects, a subject. These two sentences are considered independent clauses. They make sense apart from adding any extra wording. We also understand that subjects perform the verb or perform the action. And so we understand also that verbs shows action or links. So be verb, is, am, are, was, where. Then we have phrases: on the floor with the red car, muddy feet, and understand the difference between the simple sentence, which is also considered an independent clause. The dog is sleeping. And then after the class ends, once you stop right there, it should tell you whether or not it's a fragment, which also can be a dependent clause. So we would know that we would need to change, take out the period, right? Take out the period, add a comma, and then now we have DCIC, DC, comma, IC. That's your dynamic. We have the baby coming before the mother, but always remember that the mother does not have to have the baby to be complete. The baby needs the mother to be complete. Okay. So then we have sentence patterns. Okay, remember those sentence patterns: subject verb, compound subject compound subject, compound verb, verb subject, and verb compound subject. Okay, and then always remember the compound sentences for method number one. We understand that when we want to join two independent clauses or two simple sentences together, we can do so in three different ways. And these are your methods, right? And so we can do so with comma fanboys, semicolon by itself, semicolon conjunctive adverb, and comma. And you stay within the exact same area of the sentence. You don't need to get creative, right? And so we have the different patterns: method one, method two, method three. And to understand that fanboys tend to be coordinating conjunctions. And then I have to look up something because I haven't looked at it a long time. So I'm going to wait before I say anything there. And then use a coordinating conjunction, comma plus fanboys. And so we understand that if Lola wanted to buy a car, so she started to save 10% of her weekly paycheck, right? And the use of so here should be the same meaning or have the same meaning as the use of therefore here, right? And then we have the different meanings. Also, using the semicolon by itself in the same area that you place the comma fanboy, you also place semicolon. So these are your examples here, and these are the standard ways to actually, correct a sentence. Okay, so then we have semicolon plus conjunctive adverb plus comma, and just a recap of all the patterns. And it's good to look at the patterns in this way so you understand the difference. And then we have exercises in terms of the examples. Okay, comma splices. So this is to correct a sentence, right? Remember? So we understand that we have sentence revision methods, and hopefully, the more you get a review of this every time we do a new lecture, the more it becomes part of you. That's why I have, instead of having quizzes where you just click and guess A, B, C, and D, I wanted you to actually write this out. I mean, type this out so that you get into the mindset of typing on a computer and making sure that your sentences are actually accurate. So those are examples there. And then joining sentences for complex sentences with dependent clauses, and this can be found on 75 to 86. And so we understand the dynamic of ICDC, right? Independent clause plus dependent clause. And then DC, comma, IC, dependent clause plus independent clause, right? All right. And so then, even though can be placed in different ways, but if it's within the middle of the sentence, you don't need a comma before or after. If it precedes the sentence, meaning that this even though is a dependent word or dependent phrase, right? So then, if you removed even though and you just typed Lynn likes to eat pickles, then that would be a complete sentence. Just drop the comma and add a period. But once you place the dependent word right before the independent clause, then it makes it a dependent clause. And then when it begins the sentence, it's the full sentence, dependent word plus independent clause, comma, and then you begin the next sentence after that. All right, so how to create a dependent clause. Again, that's your dependent word plus independent clause, even though is a dependent word, phrase, or I guess you can say. And then Lynn likes to eat pickles. I don't know why I keep forgetting to add that period there. So even though Lynn likes to eat pickles, right? So we have this dependent word here. See if I can do that. And then we have this here, independent clause. Where's my underline? Okay. And so the dependent word before the independent clause makes it a dependent clause. Okay. And so that's why it's still not a complete sentence. So now I know why I left that period off, because it's not a complete sentence. It still needs a mother. So we have sample dependent words, and you have more in the course text. Okay, and then reviewing the differences. So we have simple versus compound, simple sentence, compound sentences where you have to combine two simple sentences to make a compound sentence using three methods. And then we have the complex sentence where you are adding an independent clause with a dependent clause, and there are two methods for it. Okay, so we have the examples here. So for this one, now you can find the following exercises on page 80 in the course text. They fall under complex sentences number 2. For each sentence, just identify the dependent clause, add a comma where necessary. So we understand that when there's a dependent word here, that's a dependent word before. Okay. Just going through the sentences just for a minute. Whether is a dependent word. Okay, just kind of highlighting. Sarah's face turned red because is a dependent word. Okay, when the mail carrier comes into the yard. So when is a dependent word. Okay, the fans cheer as is a dependent word. And then I must study for several hours. So that is a dependent word. So if you take the time to outline the dependent word, and let me go back to that chart for a minute. So you have, in terms of cause, contrast, time, place, condition, and you have all these different types of dependent words. So identify the dependent word first, using that chart, right? Using your course text. And once you understand where the dependent word is, whether it's at the beginning of the sentence or in the middle of the sentence. If it's at the middle of the sentence, we don't need a comma before or after. So then we can just go ahead and outline the dependent word and everything that follows after it. Underline it. Okay, it comes in the middle of a sentence. As the players approach the field. Okay, that is your dependent clause. Everything after the dependent word. Okay, and it gets tricky because if the sentences are long, it can get kind of confusing. So that I will pass the test, dependent clause. Okay, and so we know that we do not need a comma when the dependent word is within the sentence. However, if it's at the beginning of the sentence, in these cases, then we need a comma after the full dependent word, right, with a full independent clause. So we understand that. Mark that before the bell rang. Before, let me see, before the bell rang. That's underlined. Okay, and then before the bell rang, comma, because this is your DC, um, comma IC, right? DC, comma IC. So then everyone after that, when it's at the beginning, when Mike arrives tonight or tomorrow, okay, that's all underlined, okay, and then you add your comma after it. And again, the way you understand that is that what is the dependent word? The dependent word is going to come before the independent clause. And if we just said aloud, Mike arrives tonight or tomorrow, does that sound complete? Yes. And we could remove whether and just keep Mike arrives tonight or tomorrow, period, and then capitalize W, right? All right, so then at the beginning, is at the middle here. So at the beginning, when the mail carrier comes into the yard, underline, okay, my puppy barks loudly. Add a comma here. Okay, so again, when it's at the beginning of the sentence, you know it's about to, you need a comma that follows after the end of the dependent clause. When it's in the middle of the sentence, you do not need a comma before or after. Okay, so hopefully that helps you. This is again complex sentences, reviewing dependent clauses, and then other related concepts. All right, thank you for listening.